An influx of people to South Africa's urban areas is threatening food security in cities. Gauteng has a population of over 14 million, followed by KwaZulu-Natal with over 11 million. Now, what kind of contribution can urban farming make to the agricultural industry, and what are the benefits? I'm joined by Dr. Michael Magondo from it's an urban agriculture initiative, and it's called Wouldn't It Be Cool? I love that title. Who came up with that?
Well, Wouldn't It Be Cool is the name of our company, and working with a number of stakeholders, we have decided to intervene on the agricultural environment, and that's where the Urban Agriculture Initiative came around.
Explain to us, what is urban farming?
So, urban farming, urban agriculture, it's agriculture, but within an urban environment. So you can imagine the biggest constraint that's there is you don't have the typical key resource that most farming or agricultural environments have, which is vast spaces of land. We've got to try and do this in very small areas within urban spaces, but produce the same agricultural outputs as typical agricultural ecosystems.
Okay. In South Africa, is there a lot of urban farming taking place?
So there has been, and I think we've cottoned on to the term urban agriculture, but there's always been agriculture happening around the urban spaces. What has started to change is the amount of technology being applied to it, and that's improving the efficiency and the productive output of many of these operations to a point where they're competing with established larger commercial operations.
Okay, give us a couple of examples, because I know you were involved with quite a few operations in Gauteng.
Yeah, so one of the projects that we currently have is an inner city incubator that runs within the inner city of Johannesburg. In that space, the initiative that we've run over the last year is to help young entrepreneurs come onto rooftop farms where they get a 200 square meter operation, and from that you would be surprised at what kind of output each farm, a 200 square meter farming operation, can produce anything from 300 to 500, and with the new technologies now we're seeing 900 kgs a month of produce coming out of such an operation.
So it's about density, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's about the ability to increase the number of plants that you can grow within a very small space, but also reduce the dependency on other critical resources. We consume 98% less water than open field farming. 98% less water? Absolutely. So you can imagine a typical 1 hectare plot, the amount of water consumed, the sort of typical consumption for a 200 square meter farm would be so minute. It's similar to putting a small bedsitter in a building, and they consume nothing more than that.
Does this also give an advantage when it comes to you can grow crops all year round and your harvest times?
And I think that's spot on. You know, one of the critical things that we've seen is the ability to give much better entrepreneurial outcomes for the farms established. And we do this by making sure the farmers are growing out-of-season crops. And what that does is it means those crops are either being imported into the country, or many of those crops have high seasonal prices because they're out of season. And so we can grow the sort of crop varieties that are out of season any time of the year, and improving the economic outcomes for our farmers.
So this urban agriculture, there's also vertical farming, which seems to be taking off around the world. Explain to me what vertical farming is.
So in a quest to improve the density, the plant density in a space, so in 200 square meters, we're able to achieve between 3,500 and 7,000 plants in that space. Now, to do that means that we cannot just depend on planting just on 200 square meters, so you start to go up. So we have plants that grow at different levels within that 200 square meter space. In other spaces, when you increase that density, you can grow in a warehouse where you are able to achieve anything up to 10, 15 tiers of plants in a vertical context. That's improving the sort of plant density that you can achieve.
The economic viability of some of the projects you are involved in Johannesburg, are these entrepreneurs starting to make money from these small projects?
Yeah, so our first cohort of farmers went on to farm around August, September last year. Many of those farmers are turning over between 15 and 25,000 rand a month, and many of these were young entrepreneurs who didn't have any other activity prior to this. Typical profitability of most of these farms is in the region of about 60 to 70%, if you exclude the direct wages that they take out of the business as well. And we've seen some really interesting results recently, where some of our farmers are able to get as much as 150 rand a kilo for herbs like basil. We've also got very high cash crops like hops, which we've successfully now been able to grow here in Gauteng, which opens up a whole new industry of high-value crops that these farmers can now switch to.
Everyone's talking about organic foods, or we all want to go organic. We're tired of the fertilizers and so forth. Obviously, this lends itself to more organic farming or more organic crops.
Well, and you touch on a very interesting topic. It's been a big topic for the last 10 years in hydroponic farming globally, because the one critical factor in certifying organic is that it must grow in soil. So the US has recently started recognizing hydroponically grown produce as organic. Locally, we're still holding on to the fact that it must be grown in soil to be certified as organic. So the produce we put out is usually branded as natural. We cannot yet brand it as organic, but these are engagements we're having with stakeholders because this is our way around the land issue.
And you say this because some of your crops are grown in water only.
So they are grown in water. The nutrients, we have some farmers who are doing worm farming, so they produce worm tea, which is a natural nutrient source that can be fed into the hydroponic systems. So the nutrient source is actually a natural organic nutrient source, but because there's no water, it's not certifiable.
Okay, so we've got a population issue. By 2050, I think we'll add about 2 billion more people on planet Earth. Is this the solution, urban agriculture?
Absolutely, and I don't think it's just about urban agriculture. It's about creating new value chains within the agricultural ecosystem. So we now have instances where farming happens on top of a residential building. Residents of that building are able to purchase produce directly from that farmer. What that means is you get produce much fresher, you get produce which is much healthier, hasn't had to be frozen for cooking every day, and you don't have to buy in bulk because you can get it every day.
And it's cheaper because there are no transport costs and no land costs either.
Absolutely, and I think that's the critical thing, because produce is grown close to where it's consumed. We have concepts where restaurants are now putting small farms within the restaurant to be able to offer their consumers the freshest produce that they can, and those farms are maintained by entrepreneurs coming off our program.
Okay, you were telling me about a fish farming project in Johannesburg. Explain that to me.
Yeah, so we've been running a pilot in a center for persons with disabilities called Kungwini in Pretoria, and we're testing out fish production. We've just commissioned our first fish farm. It's going up at the National School of Arts, and that farm will be looking at trying to roll out trout into some of the higher-end restaurants around the Johannesburg space.
And lastly, when it comes to vertical farming, the expenses, is this expensive to start?
No, and I think this is one of the misconceptions that's out there. The technology has become easily accessible. We have worked with 3 or 4 suppliers who have been able to bring the cost of this to a point where each of the farmers is able to repay the capital for the farm within a 2-3 year period. So the costs have gone down significantly to make it accessible to smallholder farmers.
Okay, very interesting stuff. Thank you so much for joining me. Dr. Michael Magondo from the Urban Agriculture Initiative is called Wouldn't It Be Cool? Thanks for coming through.